So, good afternoon, everybody. We have three stunning CEOs. Raise the energy level a little bit. On my left, Amir from AlUla, Burak from the Fashion Commission, and last but not least, Charles Stewart from Sotheby's. So, Amir, history obviously in Saudi, France, General Entertainment Authority, Talent S. Hot air ballooning is another one.
I want to keep it interesting, a little bit interesting. Yeah.
The boutique group, and like me, you were miseducated at Harvard. So that's Burak, CEO of Fashion Commission, focusing on sustainability through his career, but the Dean of Parsons, the incredible design school out of New York, out of the US, and then with a history in Gap, in Caring, Gucci, Stella McCartney, Bottega, Veneta were your brands at that time. Swarovski, then a visiting professor at business school, and then you came to the Fashion Commission in 2021. And last but not least is Charles Stewart, CEO of Sotheby's. Sotheby's was founded in 1744, I was looking at, which is quite incredible, 40 countries, 80 locations. You now work for Patrick Drahi, who owns, Sotheby's has gone through, what, public, private, public, private, public, I think is the, and then private again. That's right. Investment banking in Brazil originally, Morgan Stanley, BBA. Then you joined Patrick Drahi at Altice in telecommunications, and then to Sotheby's in 2019. And I think you're doing about, what, 8 billion last year?
Exactly right.
And probably 10 billion this year, if I'm letting cat out of the bag.
There's 2 months left, we'll see.
Okay. Now, we're talking about arts and culture, and in trying to regenerate, reposition, or position a nation, the conventional wisdom, I think, was around 3 events. Starting at sort of the bottom, if I can, Formula One, then the Olympics, and then probably the most powerful would be the World Cup. Those 3 events, I think, to leaders of countries and nations, if they were thinking about branding and positioning, those events would be front and center. What is different about what His Excellency and the Kingdom are doing is it's on a totally different scale, a much more embracing scale, and the definition of arts and culture is very broadly defined. And I don't think we've witnessed, we were in our pre-sessions, I don't think we've witnessed anything in the world on the scale that the Kingdom is attempting to do. The vision is quite extraordinary. So we're going to explore that. So let me just kick off firstly with you, Amir. When we look at AlUla, I mean, firstly, how do you define arts and culture in your mind, in the sense we're talking about it? And secondly, what are you trying to do with AlUla?
Thank you very much. Saudi Vision 2030 has stated that culture is an indispensable driver for our quality of life. And we do believe that as the world moves on from institutional walls that used to hold custody of culture, museums, galleries, research institutions, they all have to believe that culture is not within these spaces anymore. It's the space in between. It's about people expression. People are now producing at an unprecedented rates through social media. And in Saudi Arabia, we're capturing this by allowing culture to thrive in between these institutions. Fashion, intangible histories, stories, leveraging the assets, but focusing on consumer economy and economic drivers. And in AlUla, of course, at the center stage of Saudi Arabia culture transformation, holds the legacy of more than 200,000 years of human presence, 8,000 years of civilizations, ruins that made AlUla its home. But we found as much value in nature, in people's intangible history, and we grabbed all of this and called it culture landscape. So we're more concerned with culture landscape, the relationship between human and culture than culture itself.
Okay. And just tell us a little bit about AlUla and how you're positioning it.
Simply, we look at AlUla as three ancient oases connected by a valley, and we are trying to make sure that people experience truthfully and to the full extent what a living museum means. How can every local in AlUla become a storyteller and every visitor become a co-producer of AlUla's future legacy? We're developing series of programs to add essential culture institutions, but also investing in the local community to become the curators that apply their talent, their genuine creativity to make it a unique place that can only be experienced in AlUla. So far, we have conducted above 12 billion Saudi Riyal revitalization program, and we're enjoying significant growth in tourism and culture contribution as well.
So it very fits with our question about engine of economic growth.
To me, honestly, culture cannot survive by being a higher moral agenda like the past. So we shouldn't conserve for the sake of conservation. We shouldn't do art because we want to protect art. We should look at all of these as one additional growth driver for economic activities, or otherwise they will be vanity.
Okay, Burak, so talk about it from a fashion point of view. How do you define culture, and what are you trying to do with the Fashion Commission?
Well, culture is clearly the representation of values of the past, present, and in some ways the indication of what we want for the future as a community. And in the case of the Saudi community, clearly there's a big emphasis on the heritage and the way people have been dressed through different parts of the country that's significantly represented even today's society, especially at moments like National Day, Founding Day. We are seeing the celebration of the identity of society through their way of dressing. But ultimately, it's also a big driver of economic growth. And as a sector, fashion is going to be one of the key contributors in the country. To enable that, we have created a data hub to track the cultural contribution of fashion into direct to GDP. And today, 1.4% of the economy in Saudi coming from the fashion sector itself alone. And based on our assessments, we are expecting significant growth by 2030. So we are using fashion absolutely as part of the core driver of economy, but also a representation of the values of Saudi youth today. Considering the country is 50% under 25, clearly there's a big youth culture that wants to represent their identity and showcase how it's evolving. And what better way to show that through fashion.
And there's huge spillover into the film industry, yes. Into our area around advertising and media, I mean, huge spillover from that.
Huge, huge. I mean, when you look at a sector like fashion, it's not just the clothes that you're wearing. It comes with a very big ecosystem, the full value chain, clearly from textiles, material manufacturing, but all of the services that is linked to that, from content creation, agencies, modeling. So these are all part of culture, and we are basically using fashion as a way of defining a way to represent Saudi's perspective on their values to the rest of the world, using all of these services and parts of the value chain and grow the sector.
And it's developing local talent and bringing in international talent as well.
Indeed, indeed. And to enable that, we actually started a program called Saudi 100. And now we are highlighting local brands that have big opportunity to showcase what Saudi has to offer to the rest of the world. But on top of it, we have just signed and announced 2 deals where 2 local brands received international investment from private equity.
Okay, good. Now, Charles, Sotheby's is known obviously for art, automobiles, real estate, although that's a franchise operation, as you explained to me. How do you define culture and art in the context that we're talking about?
Sure.
What are you trying to do with Sotheby's?
Well, culture for us is it's about self-expression. It's about dialogue. I love the phrase that Amir used, actually, the in-between, the space in between, because it is, between a creator and an audience. It is among, experiences, among audiences being together. The theme of the Venice Biennale next year, one of the biggest, art world events of the year, which opens next April, is called Foreigners Everywhere, In a world of globalization and different perspectives and experiences, that kind of sums up culture. At Sotheby's, our focus is really on visual art, of course, and you can define culture very, very broadly. Visual art, in economic terms, is a $60 or $70 billion sector per year. But probably more importantly, it's an amazing convener of audiences and people. And I think the opportunity that the kingdom has with their very ambitious plans to define what that looks like, in the next over the next 10 to 100 years is quite extraordinary.
Okay. Now, just turning to current events, we obviously have questions, big geopolitical questions to deal with around US and China, around Russia and Ukraine, and now, of course, even more so in the Middle East. And these world events are affecting, we've seen it in the FII this time round, are affecting how people think and how they act. In the context of what the biggest issue, the biggest problem, my favorite question that I ask clients is, what's the biggest worry that you have when you go to bed at night or wake up in the morning? What's the thing from a business point of view that comes into your head? How are these events and these geopolitical issues, particularly in relation to the Middle East, affecting your thinking? And what's the biggest issue that you face? Amma?
Thank you. I think the world has gone through geopolitical uncertainties and pandemics all the time throughout history. What we have to learn now is we have to use everything at our hand to ensure that the economy of any place, for us AlUla, is resilient and can respond. I don't think we should watch another pandemic makes everybody freak out. If we know that people in tourism will suffer from the cyclicality of how tourism is impacted by pandemics or geopolitical situation, then we have to skill people to function and be able to produce, sell, without having to meet visitors. And there are many enabling infrastructures to sell in digital markets, etc. So to me, the sustainability of our culture offer as an economy remains a top priority. And I think we've got the tools, the policies to not indulge in root cause analysis after these pandemics, but set a roadmap and a benchmark that it can be dealt with. And if we are going to take a 30% knockdown in our tourism traffic, 40% or whatever because of extraordinary conditions, it shouldn't necessarily go to zero. We should always be able to have culture thrive as an economy, even extraordinary measures. Because if economy disappears, nobody has the stamina to finance culture just out of high moral obligations.
Okay, you're right.
And in our case, we are building a greenfield economy. So it's clearly volatile when you're just putting it out into the world, which means that we need to ensure that it gets the support it needs continuously until it matures. So any instability will obviously have a big impact on our speed of growth. And we need to make sure that we are planning services and support mechanisms for any distraction that the industry can face to ensure that they are continuing. So we can do this through many means, but because it's such an interconnected world and it's a new sector, so we are very dependent on connecting to the rest of the world across for all services and support mechanisms. So we've done that during pandemic with connecting with the creatives digitally. And now that we are maturing and doing things physically, we have to balance things to make sure that this continues.
Okay, and Charles?
Yeah, and I think that at a minimum, art and culture in a time of conflict is something that at a minimum is a distraction, but it's actually much more powerful than that. It creates dialogue, it's healing. I saw that in Paris last week. It brings people together, it brings communities together. I also think that art can put any given moment into a much broader perspective. So if you look at AlUla, which is, it's an ancient civilization, but we're there today experiencing it, and the bridge it creates between the past and where we are today and everything that's gone on in between, puts things in certain perspective that's very valuable. So I do think that, especially in times of conflict, that art and culture actually have an incredibly valuable and important role to encourage dialogue and to find, ways to move forward and peacefully.
Do you think, I mean, one of the things that we've noticed is that Gen Zers, if I can classify them as such, have a different attitude to work-life balance, work from home, work from anywhere, controversial subject. I swing from one way to the one extreme to the other on it. Do you think that is stimulating the demand for what we're talking about, of arts, culture? And of course, the way that the kingdom has defined arts and culture covers sport. We've seen the esports announcement here with golf, martial arts. I mean, it's an incredibly broad vision. Do you think there's anything going on there?
I think that, what we've seen actually since the pandemic at Sotheby's is our employees, for the most part, want to work from work because they want to be around the objects that are so extraordinary and so special. So again, it's an example of how art can be a way to convene, people, and it's an attraction. It draws you together. And I think, post the pandemic, where we can travel freely, it's been experiential. And so I think these moments for a place like AlUla, and as the kingdom is defining its art and culture and executing, more than defining, is executing its art and culture agenda, it's actually going to bring people together. People will want to be there and be part of it.
And those trends, Burak, have affected the fashion industry. I mean, presumably you have a lot more home creators.
A lot more. Indeed, what we've seen in Saudi is, I think, after the pandemic, so many people decided to create their own brands. And through our programs, we are engaging with a lot of people that are under 25 years old, that are keen to run a fashion business on the side of their existing businesses, maybe because they are more able to work from home, I'm not sure, but they're looking for that transition as well.
And it must help you in terms of what you're trying to do as younger generations look at arts and culture, and probably in a more balanced way than my generation.
I think we're lucky in Saudi Arabia, of course, to have a very young population. And I think we always think that people respond to these challenges and always need help. I think human beings are resilient, and going to home, work from home, was nothing but a proof of resiliency of humanity being productive, even if they can't meet. People today, in my opinion, and we heard this in the longevity session a minute ago, we feel that the trend of young people, they are mission-driven, they care about what they do and the value they create, and life for them matters. And I believe that if we create the right condition for them to be relevant, and they can create properly, they can engage, I think it doesn't matter where they work from. We're training now our community in AlUla to be not only resilient, but anti-fragile, that how these challenges turn them to be stronger and be relevant and create economic value for themselves, to better themselves, even when we are faced with some of the extraordinary challenges, because technology is there, policy is something we can devise, and people in general know their way around thriving.
Okay. Now, we've got 33 seconds left. AI. What impact is that having? Let's start with you, Charles. What's that impact AI having on your business?
It's going to completely change how creators create. The tool set, the approach to it, digital native and beyond. So I think it's has the potential to be an absolute game changer. It will also inform and shape what we like and how we discover things, and how we can.
Are you seeing impact now?
Starting to. Yeah. It's very early, but starting to.
Okay, Burak, quickly.
You're definitely seeing on the business side of it. I think it's going to impact a lot of jobs, especially in the office side. Creativity, obviously, is now getting inspired and used by and connecting AI and designers together. But one anecdote is we just did our first ever Riyadh Fashion Week. One of the designers was inspired by the impact of AI and Industrial Revolution, and he wanted to celebrate the workers. So he went back to the past to say that we want workers to be recognized and human power's importance, with a full collection, with a messaging that's fighting against AI as well.
So it's starting to have an impact already in your business?
Yeah.
And we'll leave the last word to AlUla and Amma.
For us, it's an opportunity for planning. We can have better urban planning, better prediction of traffic, better prediction of security, managing our marketing. We think of it as one of the largest future employer for our talents in AlUla, as long as we equip people with the right skills to know how to use AI, but also how to help others use it. So it's just an opportunity that we have to ride.
Okay, good. So thank you to our 3 super CEOs. We exceeded the time limit, but there was no theatrical hook to push us off. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.